That your car, ma'am? Or are you just standing near it? Officer Blake Reynolds said it under the white gas station lights with a smile that made the question sound less like curiosity and more like a verdict. Marissa Grant stood beside Pump 4 with a paper coffee cup in one hand and her key fob in the other, rain tapping against the metal canopy above her and running in silver threads down the windshield of the black SUV. The highway behind the station stretched dark and wet for miles, its lanes glowing with passing headlights and red reflections from the convenience store sign. She had been on the road for more than 140 miles, driving through weather that turned every mile marker into a blur, trying to reach Fort Redstone before the family readiness meeting began. Her coat was damp at the cuffs. Her coffee had already gone lukewarm. Her phone had buzzed twice in her pocket, but she had ignored it long enough to pay for gas, buy a bottle of water, and step back outside into the kind of night that made small towns feel even smaller. Officer Reynolds stood a few feet away in a dark patrol uniform, his body camera clipped neatly to his chest, the tiny red light blinking beneath the rain-dark brim of his cap. Beside him, Officer Daniel Pierce remained closer to the cruiser, younger, quieter, watching the scene with the stiff posture of someone who had not yet decided whether silence was obedience or fear. Marissa looked from Reynolds to the SUV, then back to the camera on his chest. "It is mine," she said calmly. "And your body camera should record the question exactly as you asked it." The air under the canopy changed. A man filling a pickup truck stopped squeezing the gas handle. Inside the store, Lily Harper, the clerk on night shift, glanced up from behind the counter at the security monitor. Reynolds's smile thinned. He was used to nervous laughter, quick apologies, lowered eyes, hands fumbling for papers before he even asked. He was not used to a black woman answering him as if every word already belonged in a transcript. "You always talk to officers like that?" he asked. Marissa did not move. "I answer questions clearly." "That sounds like attitude." "No," she said, setting her coffee on top of the pump with careful control. "That sounds like documentation." Pierce shifted slightly near the cruiser. Reynolds noticed and turned his shoulder just enough to reclaim the moment. "License and registration." Marissa reached slowly into her coat pocket, keeping her other hand visible. "Before I provide anything, I would like to know the reason for this stop." "This is not a stop," Reynolds said. "This is an inquiry." "Then I am asking the reason for the inquiry." Rain beat harder along the edge of the canopy. Reynolds looked at the black SUV again, the clean leather interior, the military base invitation lying face down on the passenger seat, the folded packet of family support documents tucked beside it. He had not seen the name printed on the invitation yet. He had not seen the missed calls lighting up from General Grant. He only saw what his pride allowed him to see. A woman he thought he could corner with tone. Marissa handed him her license without a tremor. Reynolds studied it, then looked at her face as if the card had given him an answer he did not like. "Stay right there," he said. Marissa looked up at the gas station camera above the store entrance, then back at his blinking body camera. "I have not moved, officer." Reynolds carried Marissa's license back toward his cruiser as if the card itself had become suspicious. The rain made soft ticking sounds across the hood, and the glow from the gas station canopy stretched long white rectangles over the wet concrete. Marissa remained beside Pump 4, exactly where he had told her to stand, her coffee cooling on top of the pump, her shoulders straight under the damp weight of her coat. She could feel people watching without turning her head. The man at the pickup pretended to check his receipt. Lily Harper glanced between the counter and the security monitor inside the store. Officer Daniel Pierce stood near the cruiser with one hand resting against the open passenger door, his face unreadable, but his eyes moving from Marissa to Reynolds and back again. Marissa had been watched before, at military banquets where strangers assumed she was staff until her husband entered the room. At charity events where donors spoke over her until they learned she chaired the Family Readiness Council. At airports where her calm became a reason for extra questions. She had learned not to spend her dignity trying to convince every stranger she belonged. Dignity was not a performance. It was a posture you kept when someone tried to write you smaller than you were. Her phone vibrated again in her pocket, a steady pulse against her side. She knew who it was without looking. Nathaniel did not call repeatedly unless timing mattered. The meeting at Fort Redstone was not ceremonial. Families from 3 deployment groups were gathering to discuss emergency support, housing concerns, mental health resources, and the quiet pressure carried by spouses who smiled in public while worrying in private. Marissa had spent weeks organizing the documents on the passenger seat, reading every note from every mother, husband, wife, and child who felt unseen by the system that depended on them. She was not late because she had taken a wrong turn. She was late because a man with a badge had looked at her car before he looked at her name. Reynolds returned with her license in one hand and a look that had sharpened during the short walk. "Where are you headed tonight?" he asked. "Fort Redstone." Pierce looked up at that. Reynolds did not. "For what?" "A scheduled meeting." "What kind of meeting?" Marissa looked at his body camera again. "Officer Reynolds, is there a lawful reason you are questioning my destination?" His jaw tightened. "I asked the questions, and I am answering within my rights." A thin silence spread under the canopy. Reynolds glanced toward the SUV. Registration. Marissa turned slowly, opened the driver's side door only wide enough to reach the glove compartment, and retrieved the document. The interior light revealed the cream envelope on the passenger seat, the official invitation partially visible beneath the edge of a folder. Pierce saw the base emblem first. His eyes flicked toward Reynolds. "Blake," he said quietly. "That looks like base material." Reynolds took the registration from Marissa without looking at Pierce. "People print things." Marissa closed the door. "You can verify it with Fort Redstone. I am not calling a military base because you have nice stationery." Her phone vibrated again. This time Reynolds heard it. He looked down at her coat pocket. "Who keeps calling you?" Marissa's voice stayed level. "My husband." "Then he can wait." She looked at him for a long moment, and the white light above them reflected in her eyes like cold glass. "Officer, I am asking you to let me answer that call or contact your supervisor." Reynolds smiled again, but now it had no humor in it. "There it is." Marissa did not blink. "There what is?" "The attitude." Inside the store, Lily leaned closer to the security monitor, watching the red light on Reynolds's body camera blink, while the gas station camera recorded them all from above. Reynolds heard the word attitude leave his own mouth and felt the old satisfaction of naming someone before they could name themselves. It was a habit he had polished over 13 years on the highway, along with his boots, his reports, and the careful tone that made impatience sound like procedure. Around town, people called him Sharp. Diner owners waved when his cruiser rolled past. Local business leaders thanked him for keeping the exit corridor clean. At retirement breakfasts and charity raffles, he shook hands with men who liked the way he said order, as if the word belonged to people who looked like them first. He believed he could read trouble from a distance. A nervous glance. A clean car. A woman too calm under lights. A black driver who asked for a supervisor instead of apologizing. He called it instinct. Officer Daniel Pierce had heard that word too many times during his 6 months riding with him. Instinct was how Reynolds explained the long stops, the extra questions, the way some people had to prove where they were going twice. Pierce had joined the department believing rules were supposed to protect everyone from personal judgment. Reynolds treated rules like tools he owned. Tonight, under the gas station canopy, Pierce watched Marissa Grant stand beside the pump with rain shining along her coat sleeves and understood that the problem was not her tone. It was that she had refused to become small. Reynolds stepped closer, holding her license and registration between 2 fingers. "I am going to ask you one more time," he said. "Why are you headed to Fort Redstone?" Marissa kept her eyes on the blinking body camera. "I already answered. I am attending a scheduled meeting." "What meeting?" "One involving military families." Reynolds gave a short laugh. "That is convenient." Pierce looked toward the SUV again. Through the passenger window, he could see the cream envelope more clearly now, the folded packet beneath it, the corner of a printed agenda tucked under a pen. It looked organized, ordinary, and official in a way that made Reynolds' suspicion feel more personal than practical. "We could verify it," Pierce said carefully. Reynolds turned his head just enough to silence him without speaking. Marissa noticed. So did Lily Harper inside the store, where the security monitor showed all 3 of them from above. The woman standing still, the older officer crowding the moment with his voice, the younger one caught between discomfort and duty. Lily had worked nights at that station for almost 2 years. She had seen drivers argue, cry, joke, and stumble through bad weather. This was different. Marissa had not raised her voice once. She had not moved toward anyone. She had asked for procedure the way people ask for a receipt, simple and reasonable. Yet the officer kept turning her calm into a charge. Marissa's phone vibrated again. The sound was faint, buried in her coat pocket, but Reynolds looked at it like it had interrupted him on purpose. "Hands where I can see them," he said. Marissa's hands were already visible. She lifted them slightly, slow and open. "They are." The man at the pickup finally looked away. The gas pump clicked off. Rain spilled from the edge of the canopy in a steady curtain. Reynolds glanced toward the store, then back at Marissa. "You are being detained while I sort this out." Pierce shifted. "For what charge?" Reynolds did not look at him. "Failure to cooperate during an active inquiry." Marissa's face remained composed, but something in her eyes grew colder, not with fear, with recognition. "Then please state for the recording that I provided identification, answered your questions, requested verification, and asked for a supervisor." Reynolds stared at her, and for the first time that night, his confidence looked less like control and more like a man realizing the record was not afraid of him. Reynolds did not repeat Marissa's words for the recording. Instead, he turned slightly toward his cruiser, the red light on his body camera blinking against the wet shine of his uniform, and spoke in a tone meant to sound official. "Subject is refusing to cooperate with a lawful inquiry." Pierce looked at him quickly. Marissa did too, but she did not flinch. The lie was not loud. That made it more dangerous. It slipped into the night wrapped in calm language, the kind that could become a report by morning if no one challenged it in time. Under the gas station canopy, the air smelled of rainwater, gasoline, and coffee drifting from the convenience store. The fluorescent lights hummed above them. The black SUV stood beside Pump 4, clean and silent, its windows streaked with rain, the cream envelope still visible on the passenger seat. Marissa kept her hands where they could be seen and looked directly at the camera on Reynolds' chest. "For the record, I am not refusing to cooperate. I provided identification, registration, my destination, and requested verification." Pierce shifted again, and this time he did not hide it. "Blake, she did give us all of that." Reynolds' jaw moved once. "Stay out of it." The younger officer's face tightened, but he fell quiet. Marissa saw the conflict in him. She had seen it in committee rooms, in military housing offices, in school board meetings near bases where one person knew something was wrong, but waited for someone braver to say it first. Silence could be fear. It could also become participation if it stayed too long. Reynolds stepped toward the SUV and pointed at the passenger seat. "What is in the envelope?" "Meeting materials." "Open it. You can verify the invitation with Fort Redstone or contact your supervisor." His eyes narrowed. "I did not ask for options, and I did not consent to a search." A passing car slowed at the edge of the lot, headlights sliding across the scene before continuing back onto the highway. Inside the store, Lily Harper stood frozen behind the counter, the security monitor reflecting in her glasses. She could see the full angle from camera 3. Marissa standing still, Reynolds pressing harder with each calm answer, Pierce watching like a man measuring his own conscience. Lily reached beneath the counter and touched the phone, not dialing yet, just feeling the weight of it under her fingertips. Marissa's cell phone vibrated again, longer this time. Reynolds glanced down. "Do not reach for it." "I am not reaching." "Who is General Grant?" The question came out before he could make it sound casual. Pierce looked sharply at the phone screen. Marissa's expression changed only slightly, a stillness gathering around her. "My husband." Reynolds gave a short laugh. "Your husband is a general." "Yes. A 4-star general just happens to be calling you at a gas station." Marissa looked at him in the cold white light. "No, officer. My husband is calling because I am late to a meeting he knows I would never miss without a reason." The rain softened for a moment, and in that small hush the phone kept glowing in her pocket. Reynolds held her license tighter. "Nice try," he said. Pierce looked at the SUV, then at the invitation, then at Marissa. "We should verify it." Reynolds turned on him. "I said I have it handled." But the moment was no longer fully his. Lily lifted the store phone, eyes fixed on the security screen, and began searching the base contact number printed on the invitation visible through the SUV window. Reynolds stepped between Marissa and the SUV as if the space beside Pump 4 had become his courtroom. The red and blue lights from his cruiser rolled across the wet concrete in slow waves, catching the edge of her license in his hand and the silver trim of the black vehicle behind her. "Stand by the cruiser," he said. Marissa looked at him, then at Pierce. then toward the store window where Lily Harper had disappeared from the counter for a moment. Am I free to leave? Reynolds smiled without warmth. Not anymore. The words landed under the canopy with a quiet finality. The man by the pickup lowered his eyes and twisted his gas cap shut faster than before. A minivan at Pump 2 pulled away without finishing its receipt. People had a way of leaving when courage became inconvenient. Marissa walked to the side of the cruiser with slow, deliberate steps, keeping her hands visible, her chin level, her breathing even. Inside her pocket, the phone vibrated again, longer than before, then stopped, then started again. The screen glowed through the fabric just enough for Reynolds to see the same name. General Grant. He looked at it and gave a soft laugh. You really expect me to believe that? I expect you to verify what you doubt, Marissa said. That is how procedure works. Procedure is not you giving orders. I am not giving orders. I am asking you to follow yours. Pierce moved closer to the SUV, not touching anything, only leaning enough to read the envelope through the rain-streaked passenger window. Fort Redstone Family Readiness Council. His eyes shifted to the printed agenda beneath it, then to the folded packet of names, housing requests, medical travel notes, child care concerns, letters from spouses who had written because someone told them Marissa Grant would listen. Pierce felt something uncomfortable settle in his chest. This was not contraband. This was not a threat. This was a woman carrying other people's worries to a room that was waiting for her. Blake, he said carefully. The invitation looks official. Reynolds turned on him with a hard stare. Back up. Pierce did not step back right away. That hesitation was small, but Marissa saw it. So did Reynolds. His authority had begun to show cracks, and he reached for the easiest way to cover them. Subject is being detained for obstruction during an active inquiry, he said toward his body camera. Marissa's eyes lifted to the blinking red light. For the record, I have not obstructed anything. I answered questions, provided documents, requested a supervisor, and asked to take a call from my husband. You do not get to decide what matters here. No, she said quietly. The record does. Inside the store, Lily held the phone to her ear with one hand and watched the security monitor with the other. The first number she had tried led to a base information desk. The second transferred her to a duty line. Now a calm voice was asking her to repeat the name on the invitation visible in the vehicle. Lily swallowed and looked through the window at Marissa standing under the white lights, coffee forgotten on the pump, coat damp, face composed. Marissa Grant, Lily said. She is being held outside by police, and she has been asking them to verify Fort Redstone. There was a pause on the line, then a change in the voice, sharper and more awake. Stay where you are. Do not delete any footage. Lily's fingers tightened around the receiver. Outside, Reynolds pointed toward the rear of the cruiser. You can explain yourself at the station. Pierce looked at him. Blake, we should wait. Reynolds ignored him. Marissa looked at the phone glowing again in her pocket, then at the gas station camera above the door. Officer Reynolds, she said, you are turning 5 minutes into evidence. The store phone rang again behind the glass, louder than the rain. The store phone rang with a sharp, ordinary sound that somehow pulled the whole gas station into stillness. Lily Harper stared at it for half a second, her hand still resting on the receiver from the last call, the security monitor glowing blue across her face. Outside, under the canopy, Marissa Grant stood beside the cruiser in the white spill of fluorescent light, rain falling just beyond the roofline like a curtain she had no time to cross. Her coffee sat untouched on pump 4, a small brown cup going cold while her phone kept lighting up with a name Officer Reynolds had chosen not to believe. General Grant. She did not reach for it. She did not argue. She only stood with her hands visible and her face composed, because she understood something Reynolds did not. The more he tried to control the moment, the more the moment kept recording him. Pierce remained near the SUV, his eyes moving between the invitation on the passenger seat, Reynolds's body camera, and the gas station camera above the store entrance. He could feel the scene changing, not loudly, but completely, like a storm shifting direction. Blake, he said, keeping his voice low, we need to slow this down. Reynolds did not look at him. We are past that. No, Pierce said, and the word surprised even him. Reynolds turned then, his expression tightening. What did you say? Pierce swallowed, but his eyes stayed up. She asked for verification. We have a document in view, a repeated caller, and a clerk who contacted the base. We should wait for confirmation before moving her anywhere. Marissa looked at the younger officer, not with gratitude exactly, but recognition. A person choosing the truth late was still different from a person never choosing it at all. Reynolds stepped closer to Pierce, lowering his voice, but the body camera remained on, and Marissa watched the red light blink against the rain-specked uniform. Do not forget who is senior here. Pierce glanced at the camera. I am not forgetting anything. Inside the store, Lily picked up the ringing phone. Red Oak Fuel, this is Lily. She listened, and the color drained from her face so quickly that even through the window Marissa saw it. Lily turned toward the glass, holding the receiver with both hands now. Yes, ma'am. She is outside. Yes, the officers are still here. Yes, the cameras are recording. Reynolds saw her speaking and frowned. What is she doing? Marissa's voice stayed soft. Verifying what you refused to verify. The rain slowed to a fine mist, and the night seemed to sharpen around every object. The black SUV, the cream envelope, the blinking camera, the cruiser lights, the phone glowing again in Marissa's pocket. Inside the store, Lily covered the receiver and pushed open the glass door with her shoulder. Her sneakers squeaked on the wet concrete as she stepped under the canopy. She looked too young to carry the weight of the sentence in her mouth, but she carried it anyway. Officer Reynolds, she said, voice trembling but clear. There is a Colonel Hayes from the Pentagon liaison office on the phone. She is asking why Mrs. Grant is being detained at my station. Pierce closed his eyes for one brief second. Reynolds stood frozen, the confidence on his face cracking without making a sound. Marissa did not smile. She only looked at the body camera and waited for the truth to enter the record. Reynolds looked at Lily as if she had spoken a language he did not want anyone else under the canopy to understand. The words Pentagon liaison office hung between the gas pumps and the cruiser lights, heavier than the rain, heavier than the license still trapped in his hand. For 5 seconds, no one moved. The pickup driver had gone. The minivan was gone. The highway kept breathing beyond the station, but under the white lights, everything felt suspended. Pierce opened his eyes and looked at Marissa Grant differently. Not with fear, not with sudden politeness because of a title, but with the uncomfortable awareness that he had watched a woman ask for procedure and had almost let pride answer instead. Reynolds recovered first, or tried to. Give me the phone, he said to Lily. His voice was flat now, drained of the casual mockery he had worn so easily minutes earlier. Lily held the receiver against her chest. She asked to speak with Mrs. Grant. Reynolds stepped toward the store door. This is my scene. Marissa's voice stopped him without rising. No, officer. This is a recorded interaction at a public business, involving a citizen you detained after refusing verification. Pierce looked at the body camera again. The red light was still blinking. Reynolds noticed the glance and stiffened. He took the receiver from Lily and lifted it to his ear. This is Officer Reynolds. The voice on the other end was calm, female, and precise. Officer Reynolds, this is Colonel Rebecca Hayes from the Pentagon Liaison Office. You are currently detaining Mrs. Marissa Grant, invited guest of Fort Redstone, spouse of General Nathaniel Grant, and scheduled participant in a family readiness meeting. Confirm her status and explain why she has not been permitted to answer repeated calls. Reynolds's throat moved. He looked at Marissa, then at the SUV, then at the envelope he had dismissed without reading. Colonel, there has been a misunderstanding. The pause that followed seemed to reach across every camera at the station. Then preserve the record so the misunderstanding can be reviewed accurately. Pierce lowered his eyes for a moment, because that sentence said what he had been afraid to say. Marissa stood under the lights with rain misting behind her, coffee cold, phone still glowing in her pocket, and felt no triumph. Only the tired weight of something familiar. She had not wanted her husband's rank to prove her humanity. She had wanted the law to do that before anyone knew his name. Colonel Hayes continued, her voice sharp enough now for Lily and Pierce to hear fragments through the receiver. Gas station video, body camera footage, dispatch notes, and all statements from both officers are to be preserved. Mrs. Grant is to be allowed to contact Fort Redstone immediately. Reynolds's hand tightened around the phone. I did not know who she was. Marissa looked at him then, and the canopy lights reflected across her face like pale fire. That is exactly the problem, she said. You did not need to know who my husband was. You only needed to know the law. Pierce turned toward his own notepad and began writing, slowly at first, then with growing certainty. Time of initial contact. Identification provided. Verification requested. Supervisor requested. Detention continued. Lily stood by the store door, still pale, still holding herself steady. Reynolds lowered the phone, but he did not look powerful anymore. He looked like a man hearing his own words come back to him with witnesses attached. Marissa finally reached into her pocket, slowly, in full view of both officers, and answered the call that had been waiting. Marissa answered with the speaker turned low, but the first sound of her husband's voice still changed her face. Not because it rescued her. Not because the rank behind it suddenly made her real. Because beneath the calm voice of General Nathaniel Grant was the fear of a man who had spent his life managing crises and had just realized the one person he could not reach was standing under gas station lights with strangers, deciding whether she deserved basic procedure. "Marissa," he said, controlled but tight, "are you safe?" She looked at Reynolds, then at Pierce, then at the body camera still blinking in the cold white light. "I am safe enough to speak," she answered. That sentence settled over the canopy with more force than anger ever could. Reynolds lowered his eyes. Pierce stopped writing for half a second, then continued. Lily stood by the store door, arms folded around herself, watching Marissa as if she had never seen dignity hold so still under pressure. General Grant did not ask to speak to the officer. He did not bark orders through the phone. He knew his wife well enough not to turn her into an extension of his authority. "Colonel Hayes is coordinating with Fort Redstone," he said. "I'm on my way to the meeting room. Take your time. Make sure the record is complete." Marissa closed her eyes briefly. That was why she loved him. Not because he could make rooms stand when he entered, but because he understood that power used too quickly could erase the very lesson the moment needed to teach. "I will be there," she said. "And Nathaniel?" "Yes. Tell the families I am sorry for the delay." His voice softened. "They are waiting for you." When the call ended, the night felt different. The rain had thinned to a mist, and the reflections on the concrete looked almost still. Marissa placed the phone back in her pocket, then turned to Reynolds. "I need my license and registration returned." Reynolds handed them back without the careless confidence he had used before. His fingers did not brush hers. His eyes did not meet hers. "Mrs. Grant," he began, "I did not intend." "Do not repair this with intention," she said. "Preserve it with accuracy." Pierce looked up. Marissa continued, her voice calm, each word clean enough for every camera. "Your report should say I provided identification. It should say I stated my destination. It should say I requested verification, asked for a supervisor, and was detained after doing all of that. It should say Officer Pierce recommended verification before transport. It should say the clerk called Fort Redstone when you would not." Lily's lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. Pierce wrote faster now. Reynolds swallowed, his jaw tense, but the argument had left him. Colonel Hayes's voice came again from the store phone, still connected inside. "Officer Pierce, confirm preservation of body camera footage and gas station video." Pierce stepped toward the store entrance. "Yes, Colonel. I will document it." Reynolds turned sharply, but there was no command left strong enough to stop what had already begun. Marissa picked up her cold coffee from Pump 4 and looked at it for the first time in several minutes. It seemed like a small, ordinary thing from another life. She threw it away, then opened the SUV door and took the cream envelope from the passenger seat. The family readiness documents were still dry, still organized, still waiting. She looked at Reynolds one last time. The law should not need a last name before it remembers its purpose. Then she stepped into the driver's seat, and under the steady gaze of 3 cameras, the record kept breathing. Fort Redstone rose from the dark beyond the rain like a place built out of discipline and quiet light. By the time Marissa Grant reached the main gate, the storm had softened into a fine mist, and the black SUV carried thin silver lines of water across its hood. The guard checked her identification, then looked at the invitation on the passenger seat and straightened with a kind of respect that did not feel heavy, only proper. No one asked whether the car was hers. No one asked why she sounded calm. No one turned dignity into suspicion. She drove through the gate slowly, past rows of wet flags, past brick buildings glowing behind security glass, past sidewalks where young service members moved quickly under umbrellas toward night duty. Her hands stayed steady on the wheel, But the delay sat inside her chest like a stone. Not because she had been embarrassed. She had survived embarrassment long before she married a general. It stayed because she knew how easily the same 5 minutes could have ended differently for someone without cameras, without a recognizable last name, without a clerk willing to make a call, without a younger officer finally choosing the record over loyalty. Inside the family readiness building, the hallway smelled faintly of floor polish, coffee, and raincoats. Voices quieted when Marissa entered, not because she demanded silence, but because everyone had been waiting. General Nathaniel Grant stood near the conference room door in his dress uniform, tall and composed, but his eyes softened when he saw her. He did not pull her into a display of relief. He knew her better than that. He simply stepped aside and let her enter first. Around the table sat spouses, parents, adult children, counselors, and officers responsible for the families behind the uniforms. Some faces were tired. Some were worried. All of them turned toward the cream envelope in Marissa's hand. She placed it on the table and smoothed one damp corner with her thumb. "Thank you for waiting," she said. Her voice was steady, though the night still clung to her coat. "Some delays teach us exactly why this work matters." No one interrupted. Colonel Rebecca Hayes sat at the far end of the room with a separate folder closed beneath her hand. On its cover was the incident review request from the gas station, along with a preservation checklist for body camera footage, store video, dispatch notes, officer statements, and witness contact. Officer Daniel Pierce had already submitted his first written account. Lily Harper had secured the original gas station footage. Officer Reynolds's report would no longer be the only version of the night. Marissa saw the folder, then looked back at the families. She did not smile. This was not victory. Victory would have meant no one needed proof to be treated lawfully. She opened the meeting packet and began with the first family letter, reading the concern exactly as it had been written. Housing delays, childcare gaps, counseling access, transportation for medical visits. Names returned to the room one by one, not as complaints, but as lives asking not to be overlooked. Later, after the meeting ended and the families left in quiet groups, Marissa stood by the window overlooking the wet parade ground. Nathaniel came beside her without speaking. Across the room, Colonel Hayes opened the review folder and placed the gas station still frame on top. Marissa looked at the image for a long moment. White lights, wet concrete, a black woman standing still while power tried to decide what she was worth. Then she turned back to the table, picked up a pen, and wrote the first instruction in clean, careful letters. "Start with the camera." Outside, the flags moved gently in the last wind of the storm, and inside, under steady military lights, the truth began its quieter march.